Spanx is in all the top retail stores. I meet people all the time that say, how in the world did you get into Neiman's and Saks? And I say, I called them. And they just look at me. And they say, well, didn't you go to trade shows? I've been going to trade shows for 7 years, hoping that a Neiman's buyer walks by. I didn't know enough to do that. And it ended up being a blessing. So I always encourage people to think outside of the box. The way it's always been done isn't necessarily the way it should be done. And oftentimes what's inside of you is a better way of going about it. And so some of the things I contribute my success to, believe it or not, number one is failure. I had always wanted to be a lawyer, and I failed the LSAT. Spanx would not exist if I had not failed the LSAT. And at that moment in my life, it was the most devastating thing. But I've realized that failure is nothing more than life's way of nudging you and letting you know that you're not on the right path. So here I am because of that. And the second thing is visualization. I visualized this for myself. When I was selling copiers door to door, I had a very clear vision of what my life was going to be like. And I encourage everyone to do it. Take a snap photo of what success looks like for you. How many employees do you have? How much are you making? Where do you live? Are you sitting at a table with world leaders? Are you standing on a stage in New York City giving a speech? And hold on to that snapshot, and you will subconsciously start to make decisions that get you there. And so my snap photo for myself when I was going door to door to sell copiers was to be self-employed, invent a product that I could sell to lots of people and not just one copier to each person, and create a business for myself that would continue to fund itself if I wasn't present. I wanted money to be generated without me having to be there. I was that specific in my vision. And the third thing is goal setting. It sounds so cliche, but it is so true. The two things I want to say about that is if you write your goals down, it makes all the difference. Harvard did a study in 1973. They took the graduating class and asked how many of them had goals. 100% of them had goals. Well, they asked how many had written down their goals upon graduation. Only 5% of the class had. In 1993, 20 years later, they followed up with the class. They found that the 5% that had written down their goals 20 years prior upon graduating were worth more financially than the other 95% of the class put together. So I have always written my goals down about what I wanted to achieve, and I really attribute a lot to that. And then aim high. It's really true. And then trust your gut. It's so important to trust your gut. I saw a man speak one time and he said, I'll prove to you in 4 words there's no such thing as a bad idea. And he said, teenage, mutant, ninja, turtles. So I'm here today to prove to you in 2 words there's no such thing as a bad idea, and that's footless pantyhose. So no matter what your ideas are, you're doing something better than your competitors. That's why you're in business. You've thought of an idea. That's why you're here. And then be prepared for the opportunity. So.
The biggest obstacle today for female entrepreneurs is that there are not enough role models willing to speak out as well as mentor, especially in helping female entrepreneurs get funded. Today, venture-backed, female-led and female-funded companies are only under 8%. Yet 55% graduate from college now in terms of women, and in grad school, I think HBS is a record 40% matriculation of women. But yet that's not really reflective of the industry that we're in terms of entrepreneurship. There are a lot of female entrepreneurs, but I think that continues to be a challenge. I also think that there are some role models that happen in the beginning where we start to think that we have to pursue professional careers. And some women fall into entrepreneurship because they're looking for flexibility later in their career, and they start to develop a business plan that suits their current lifestyle. May not necessarily be something they're truly passionate about, or something that they saw in the beginning as addressing an actual consumer pain point or a business need. And I find that if we could just learn earlier on, and in fact I'm getting involved with 7th and 8th grade girls, around entrepreneurial competencies at a younger age, then we become more aware of our entrepreneurial bent earlier, so that when we come up with an idea, we're willing to launch it sooner, rather than kind of falling into it because we're now looking for some flexibility in our work-life balance.
So the question is, can you talk more about sort of the initial entrepreneurial process, essentially? One of the biggest assets I had was the fact that there was a thesis requirement at Princeton, in all honesty, because it was my opportunity to develop the plan and argument for the creation of this organization. And I'm not sure I would have spent 4 months and done lots of research and developed, at least what I thought at the time was a well thought through plan this is sort of obvious, but maybe not to everyone. I think really taking the time to do the research and develop the plan initially is, clearly step one. I say all the time too, and it sounds maybe flippant, but I really, really, truly mean it. I think the other big asset I had was my inexperience. And I didn't know what was impossible. And I think there's much to be said for that. And there's also much to be said for experience. But I don't think we would have Teach for America today if I had known at some level more than I knew then. So the point is, embrace your inexperience. Don't be held back by it. It can be the other thing I would say, is, in order to get this off the ground, I needed a lot of help. And in particular, and most dauntingly at the time, I needed a lot of money. So I spent that seemed like the most daunting piece of this to me. I developed this plan. I had this idea that it just had to start with 500 people. That was based on various convictions around conveying that this was a movement and not a little program. I needed to surround it with a sense of urgency and national importance. But that was going to cost $2.5 million, and where was that money going to come from? So I spent after I got the initial seed grant, from one of those people quoted in the Fortune article I mentioned earlier. I just wrote letters to these people blindly. Those people and some other randomly selected corporate executives, like the CEOs of major companies I'd heard from. Talk about the power of inexperience. Some of those people actually met with me. Embrace the inexperience. But I spent the first 3 months after I graduated from college just trying to get into doors. Of course, this is more challenging than it seems now. I would send 100 letters and get a meeting or two, but then work out from those people to try to meet others. And I think, I got lots and lots and lots of no's. And I think one thing I came to see, and probably just knew intuitively, is this is a search for allies. You actually don't need everyone. You need a few true allies. And I feel like my whole last 20 years has been a search for allies. And, what I ultimately realized too is that, the people you meet in that first summer may say no and no and no for the next 12 years, and in year 13 could be your biggest enabler. And I wish I'd known that then, because I would have been much nicer to everyone and kept in touch with everyone. But it really is it's just a law of life I've now discovered.